On a bitter winter morning, Rusty the Labrador padded through the frosted hay of the barn and froze at a soft, trembling whimper hidden in a corner. Tiny amber eyes peeked from beneath a tangle of straw. A frail bobcat kitten, shivering in the cold. Rusty barking urgently until his human Emma emerged, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Following Rusty back through the frosty yard, she knelt beside the frightened creature and wrapped it in her scarf, feeling its tiny heart flutter against her palm. It's a tiny, trembling creature, no bigger than her hand. And without hesitation, Emma carried the kitten inside her cozy home. What begins as a desperate rescue in a freezing barn will spark a chain of events so improbable, so heartwarming, you won't believe it's possible. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't. And hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The wind, a bitter and relentless sculptor, had spent the night carving the Montana landscape into a masterpiece of white desolation. It howled across the vast frozen expanse of the Flathead Valley, piling snow against the weathered bones of the old farmhouse and rattling the panes of glass in their frames. Inside, wrapped in the thick woolen quilt her grandmother had made decades ago, Emma Thompson stirred. At 72, she knew the voice of a Montana winter better than her own. It was a voice that spoke of isolation, of endurance, and of a cold so profound it felt like a physical weight upon the world. 4 or 5 years since her husband, John, had passed, the silence in the house had been a presence as palpable as the cold. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of laughter and the echoes of shared footsteps. Her only shield against the quiet was a 4-legged shadow of golden fur and unconditional love named Rusty. Rusty, a Labrador whose heart was as golden as her coat, was more than a dog. She was the keeper of Emma's routines, the warm anchor in her drifting days. The first weak light of dawn seeped through the kitchen window, casting a pearlescent glow on the frosted glass. Rusty was already on her feet, stretched, her powerful legs extending, with a soft groan, and padded to the back door, her tail giving a single expectant thump against the worn floorboards. This was their ritual. Emma would rise, her joints protesting the cold, and let Rusty out for her morning inspection of the property. While the coffee percolated, filling the small kitchen with its rich, life-affirming aroma, Rusty would make her rounds, a steadfast sentinel, patrolling her domain. This morning, however, the ritual was broken. Emma had just measured the coffee grounds when she heard it. A bark, not Rusty's usual businesslike bark, that announced the successful completion of her morning duties, but a sharp, insistent, almost frantic sound that sliced through the thick morning air. Was a bark that said, "Something is wrong." "Rusty," Emma called, her voice raspy with sleep. She moved to the window, wiping a circle of condensation from the pane. She could see Rusty's tracks in the fresh snow, a dotted line leading straight to the great red barn John had built with his own 2 hands. The dog was a small golden shape against the weathered wood, dancing with agitation, her barks coming in rapid, urgent succession. She would bark at the barn, then turn and bark at the house, a clear and desperate summons. A knot of unease tightened in Emma's stomach. The barn was a place of memories filled with the scent of hay and old leather. But in the dead of winter, it could also be a place of peril. A collapsed section of roof, a predator, seeking shelter. A dozen unsettling possibilities flashed through her mind. "All right, girl. I'm coming," she muttered, pulling on her heavy-duty Parker and John's old insulated boots. The cold hit her the moment she stepped outside, a physical blow that stole her breath. The air was thin and sharp, each inhalation a pain in her lungs. The snow crunched loudly under her boots as she followed Rusty's frantic path. As she drew closer, Rusty fell silent, whining low in her throat and nudging the heavy barn door with her nose. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She fumbled with the frozen latch, her gloved fingers clumsy and stiff. With a groan of protesting hinges, the door swung inward, releasing a wave of frigid air that smelled of hay, dust, and something else. Something wild and faintly musky. The barn's cavernous interior was steeped in shadow, pierced only by thin shafts of light from the high frosted windows. It took a moment for Emma's eyes to adjust to the gloom. Rusty didn't hesitate. She trotted purposefully toward the far corner to a stack of old hay bales that hadn't been touched in years. She stopped, looked back at Emma, and let out a soft whimper. Emma followed, her boots sinking into the loose straw scattered across the floor. As she rounded the hay bales, she saw what had caused Rusty's alarm. There, nestled in a pathetic burrow of straw, was a tremor of life. It was a tiny creature, no bigger than her hand. Its fur a matted frosty brown. Two huge eyes, the color of raw amber, stared up at her, wide with a terror so absolute it seemed to swallow the tiny body. Faint, almost inaudible whimper escaped its lips, a sound of pure misery. Emma knelt, her old knees cracking in protest. It was a cat, she thought at first, but the ears were too tufted, the face too broad and wild. A small, almost imperceptible hiss confirmed her suspicion. It was a bobcat kitten, a baby alone and freezing to death in her barn. Her mind, honed by decades of farm life, immediately began to calculate the odds. It was too small to be without its mother. Something must have happened to her. Trap, a predator, the unforgiving cold. This kitten was a death sentence waiting to be carried out. The sensible part of her, the pragmatic voice that had guided her through countless harsh winters, told her to walk away. Nature was cruel, and interfering was often a fool's errand that only prolonged suffering. It was a wild animal. It belonged to the wild, and the wild had made its judgment. But then Rusty, her brave, gentle Rusty, moved forward. She nudged the shivering kitten with her wet black nose, not with aggression, but with a tenderness that defied logic. The kitten, too weak to fight, flinched, but didn't run. Simply lay there, a fragile spark of life in the vast, cold darkness. And in that moment, Emma's heart overrode her head. She saw not a wild predator, but a baby, a scared, freezing, helpless baby. She thought of the silence in her house, of the long, empty evenings. She looked at Rusty, whose compassionate brown eyes were fixed on her, pleading. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Emma whispered, her breath pluming in the icy air. Unzipped her parka and began to unwind the thick cashmere scarf from her neck. It was a gift from John, one of the last he'd ever given her. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out. The kitten hissed again, a sound with no real threat behind it, and tried to shrink further into the straw. "It's okay, little one," Emma crooned, her voice low and soothing. It's all right. We're not going to hurt you. She gently scooped the creature up in her scarf. It was shockingly light, a bundle of sharp, fragile bones and icy fur. She could feel the frantic, thready flutter of its heart against her palm, a desperate drumbeat against the encroaching silence of death. Tucking the bundle securely against the warmth of her chest, she turned and headed back to the house, Rusty trotting close at her heels, a proud and worried guardian. The wild had made its judgment, but Emma Thompson had decided to file an appeal. Back in the warmth of the kitchen, the contrast was immediate and stark. The air was humid and smelled of coffee and the faint sweet scent of the applewood burning in the stove. Emma gently placed her precious, shivering bundle on a soft towel sheet, laid out on the floor near the hearth. Carefully, she unwrapped the scarf. The Bobcat Kitten lay there momentarily, stunned by the light and warmth. Its coat was a mess of ice crystals and dirt, its tiny body racked with violent shivers. Its amber eyes, wide and luminous, tracked Emma's every move, a mixture of fear and a sliver of primal curiosity. "Now, what are we going to do with you?" Emma murmured more to herself than to the kitten. Her first priority was warmth. She filled a basin with lukewarm water, testing it with her wrist the same way she had for her own children decades ago. The kitten recoiled as she lowered it into the water, but it was too weak to struggle in any meaningful way. It let out a patoose cry as Emma gently sponged the grime from its fur. Rusty stood nearby, a silent, concerned observer, her head cocked, her tail giving a low, anxious wag. As she watched the kitten, Emma could feel the stark reality of its condition. Its ribs were like a cage beneath its skin, its spine a knobby ridge. Malnutrition and exposure had taken a heavy toll. She worked quickly, her hands sure and gentle, speaking in a constant soothing monologue. "There now, that's not so bad, is it? We've got to get you clean and warm. Can't have you catching your death of a chill, though. It looks like you're halfway there already." Once the kitten was clean, she wrapped it in a thick, dry towel and rubbed it gently until the shivering began to subside. The fur, once matted and dark, was revealed to be a beautiful spotted tapestry of tawny brown and cream. The tufts on its ears were pronounced a clear sign of its wild heritage. Next came food. Emma knew cow's milk would be too harsh. She rummaged in her pantry, her mind racing back through years of caring for all manner of creatures on the farm. She found a can of evaporated milk and remembered an old vet's recipe for orphan kittens. Mixed a small amount with a little water and a drop of corn syrup for energy, warming it slightly on the stove. The real challenge was getting the kitten to drink. She tried a small saucer first, but the kitten only stared at it, uncomprehending. It needed to suckle. Emma sighed, realizing a trip to town was inevitable. But that would have to wait. For now, she would have to improvise. She found an old eyedropper in her medicine cabinet, sterilized it, and filled it with the warm milk formula. Cradling the kitten in one arm, she brought the dropper to its lips. The kitten turned its head away, hissing weakly. "Come on now," Emma coaxed. "You need this. Just a little taste." She squeezed a single drop onto its mouth. The kitten's pink tongue flicked out, a purely reflexive action. Tasted the sweetness. Its ears twitched. Emma squeezed another drop. This time, the kitten licked it away with a flicker of interest. Slowly, Painstakingly, drop by drop, she managed to get a small amount of the life-giving fluid into the tiny animal. It was a victory that felt monumental. Exhausted, the kitten fell asleep in her arms, its breathing still shallow, but more regular. Emma prepared a makeshift nursery. A cardboard box lined with old soft flannel shirts with a hot water bottle, wrapped in a towel tucked in one corner. To simulate the warmth of a mother's body, she placed the sleeping kitten inside and set the box on the floor near the stove, where Rusty immediately took up her position as a silent furry sentry. That first night was a long vigil. Emma set her alarm for every 2 hours, just as she had for her own newborns. Each time she would wake with a start, her first thought for the tiny creature in the box. Each time she would find Rusty awake, her head resting on the edge of the box, watching over its occupant. The feedings were a slow, patient battle against the kitten's weakness and lingering fear. Emma would sit on the warm kitchen floor in the dead of night. The only sounds, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the soft crackle of the fire, coaxing life one drop at a time into the fragile body. During one of these late-night feedings, as the kitten began to suckle with a bit more strength, Emma found herself studying its delicate, fierce face. Was a creature of resilience, fragile, but tenacious. Like a willow branch, she thought, which bends in the fiercest storm but rarely breaks. Willow, she whispered. I think I'll call you Willow. The act of naming felt like a promise. It was a commitment. Willow was no longer just a wild thing she had rescued. She was a member of this quiet, lonely household. Days bled into a week. Emma made the trip into the nearby town of Kalispell to see the local veterinarian, a man named Dr. Miller, who had tended to her animals for 30 years. She didn't take Willow with her, not wanting to cause the kitten more stress, but she described the situation in detail. Dr. Miller, a practical man with kind eyes, listened patiently. Emma, you have a big heart, but you know as well as I do, this is a risk, he warned, leaning back in his creaky office chair. She's a wild animal. Her instincts are going to kick in eventually. What happens when she's bigger? Stronger? I know, Ben, Emma said, her gaze steady. But what was I supposed to do? Let her freeze? He sighed, knowing he couldn't argue with her compassion. He sold her the proper kitten milk replacer and a set of nursing bottles, gave her some deworming medication, and offered a final piece of advice. Just be careful for your sake and for Rusty's. The warning echoed in Emma's mind, a quiet hum of doubt beneath the surface of her resolve. But every time she looked at Willow, that doubt faded. She saw the kitten's trust growing day by day. Willow began to recognize the sound of Emma's footsteps and would greet her with a wobbly, squeaking meow. She started to purr, a sound like a tiny, rumbling motor that sent vibrations through Emma's hands and straight to her heart. The bond between Willow and Rusty was a miracle unfolding in slow motion. After the first few days of cautious curiosity, Rusty seemed to officially adopt the kitten as her own. When Willow was strong enough to stumble out of her box, Rusty was there to greet her with a gentle lick. Willow, in turn, began to see the large, warm dog not as a threat, but as a source of comfort and security. She would need her tiny paws into Rusty's thick fur, her purr growing louder as she snuggled against the dog's warm belly. Rusty would rest her great head beside the kitten, her eyes half closed in a state of serene contentment. They became an inseparable pair. Emma would watch, mesmerized, as Willow, growing stronger and more playful, would stalk Rusty's swishing tail, pouncing with a ferocious, comical intensity. Rusty, ever patient, would tolerate the attacks from the tiny predator, sometimes batting her back gently with a paw the size of Willow's entire head. The house, once so quiet, was now filled with the soft sounds of their unlikely friendship. The patter of paws on the wood floor, the soft thud of Rusty's tail, the chirping meows of a bobcat kitten who had forgotten she was supposed to be wild. One evening, sitting in her armchair with a book open in her lap, Emma watched them by the fire. Willow was curled up on Rusty's back, a small spotted comma on a sea of gold. Rusty was snoring softly. The sight filled a void in Emma's chest she hadn't realized was so cavernously empty. Looked over at the photograph of John on the mantelpiece, his kind, crinkled smile beaming back at her. "You wouldn't believe it, John," she whispered, a smile touching her own lips. "You just wouldn't believe the family I've got now." The winter still raged outside, but inside Emma's farmhouse, a thaw had begun. Winter slowly relinquished its icy grip on the valley. The relentless winds softened, and the sun, once a distant pale wafer, began to shine with a tentative warmth. Patches of brown earth appeared in the sea of white, and the mournful silence of winter was gradually replaced by the cheerful gurgle of melting snow and the chirping of returning birds. Inside the farmhouse, a similar transformation was underway. Willow had blossomed. The scrawny, half-frozen creature Rusty had found was gone, replaced by a sleek, muscular young bobcat. Her coat was thick and beautifully marked, her tufted ears alert and expressive, and her amber eyes shone with intelligence and a healthy dose of mischief. Her wild instincts were a constant, fascinating presence. She moved with a silent, fluid grace that was utterly unlike a domestic cat, her powerful hind legs allowing her to leap onto countertops and bookshelves with breathtaking ease. She would spend hours watching the birds at the feeder outside the window, her body tense, her tail twitching, a silent hunter trapped behind a pane of glass. Yet for all her wildness, she was deeply bonded to her saviors. She would greet Emma in the morning by rubbing against her legs, her purr a deafening rumble. She still sought out Rusty as her primary source of comfort, curling up with the dog for long afternoon naps. Their games had evolved. Now they would engage in boisterous wrestling matches, rolling around on the living room rug in a tangle of golden fur and spotted grace. Rusty, despite her size and strength, was always gentle, seeming to understand the delicate balance of their relationship. Willow, for her part, never used her formidable claws on her canine friend, reserving them for the unfortunate armchair that had become her scratching post. Emma found a new rhythm to her days, a rhythm dictated by the needs and antics of her strange mixed-species family. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for 5 years had receded, pushed back by the vibrant, chaotic life that now filled her home. Dr. Miller's warnings about Willow's wild nature still echoed in the back of her mind, a quiet note of caution. She knew this idyllic arrangement couldn't last forever. Eventually, Willow's instincts might call her back to the wild. The thought brought a pang of preemptive grief, but Emma pushed it away, choosing to focus on the joy of the present. As spring began to unfurl in earnest, painting the valley in shades of green, Emma noticed a change in Rusty. Her normally energetic Labrador had become more lethargic. Her appetite had increased and her belly had grown round and firm. Emma, at first, chalked it up to too many winter treats and not enough exercise. But one afternoon, as she was brushing Rusty's thick coat, she felt a distinct rolling movement beneath her hands. A slow smile spread across Emma's face. "Well, I'll be," she murmured, scratching Rusty behind the ears. "You've been keeping a little secret, haven't you, girl?" A visit from a neighboring farmer's handsome black lab a few months prior had apparently not been just a friendly social call. Rusty was pregnant. The news sent a ripple of excitement through the quiet farmhouse. Emma began to prepare, laying out a whelping box in a quiet corner of the utility room, lining it with clean blankets and old towels. Willow watched these preparations with intense curiosity. She would sniff at the new box, her nose twitching, and watch Emma with her unblinking amber eyes, as if trying to decipher the meaning of this new development. Her connection to Rusty seemed to deepen even further. She became the dog's shadow, rarely leaving her side, often resting her head on Rusty's swollen belly as if listening to the secrets within. One cool spring dawn, the time came. Rusty began to pant and pace restlessly, seeking out the whelping box Emma had prepared. Emma stayed with her, her presence a calm and reassuring constant. She sat on a low stool beside the box, speaking in soft, encouraging tones and stroking Rusty's head as the first contractions began. Willow was a silent, anxious observer. She hid under the kitchen table at first, peeking out, her body tense. The sounds of Rusty's labor, the heavy panting, the occasional low whimper of pain, clearly distressed her. She didn't understand what was happening to her friend, her protector. Emma, sensing the bobcat's anxiety, spoke to her as well. "It's all right, Willow. Rusty's okay. She's just having her babies." Slowly, cautiously, Willow crept out from under the table. She moved with her characteristic stealth, her paws making no sound on the linoleum floor. Stopped a few feet from the whelping box, her body low to the ground, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Over the next few hours, 4 tiny puppies entered the world. They were perfect, wriggling bundles of life. 2 golden like their mother and 2 a glossy midnight black. Rusty, exhausted, but triumphant, immediately set to work, cleaning each newborn with vigorous licks of her tongue, nudging them toward her to nurse. Once the puppies were settled and suckling contentedly, a profound peace settled over the room. Rusty, a new mother, was instinctively protective. Her eyes scanned the room, alert for any potential threat. Her gaze fell on Willow, who was still frozen in place, watching the scene with an intensity that made Emma hold her breath. This was the moment of truth. This was where the wild, unpredictable nature of a bobcat could clash with the fierce maternal instinct of a dog. Dr. Miller's warnings came rushing back to Emma. Rusty let out a soft whine, a sound of invitation. She trusted Willow. With a gentle nudge of her nose, she seemed to be encouraging the bobcat to come closer. Hesitantly, Willow took a step forward, then another. She reached the edge of the whelping box and peered over. He saw the tiny squirming puppies, heard their soft squeaks and suckling sounds. Her ears swiveled, taking in every detail. Her nose twitched, deciphering the new smells of birth and milk. Emma watched, her hand hovering, ready to intervene. Willow lowered her head into the box. She sniffed at the nearest puppy, a small golden female. The puppy, blind and deaf, squirmed in response to the new scent. Then, to Emma's utter astonishment, Willow did something extraordinary. She began to lick the puppy. Her rough, cat-like tongue was surprisingly gentle as she groomed the newborn's head, mimicking the mother's care. A wave of emotion washed over Emma, so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. She watched as Willow moved from one puppy to the next, bestowing a soft lick on each one before settling down at the edge of the box. A vigilant co-guardian, she didn't try to interfere with Rusty's nursing. She simply lay there, her rumbling purr a soothing counterpoint to the puppy's soft squeals. She was not a predator. She was not a threat. In that moment, she was family. She was Aunt Willow. The days that followed were a blur of chaotic, heartwarming joy. The farmhouse, once a bastion of solitude, became a noisy, bustling nursery. Raising 4 rambunctious puppies was a full-time job, and it was a job that Rusty and Willow shared. Rusty was the quintessential mother, patient and nurturing. She fed them, cleaned them, and tolerated their endless climbing and clambering with a saintly sigh. Willow, however, took on the role of head of entertainment and security. When the puppies' eyes opened and they began to toddle around, Willow was their primary playmate. She was endlessly fascinating to them. She would stalk them through the living room, wiggling her hind quarters before pouncing into a soft pile of them, sparking a frenzy of yips and tumbles. She taught them how to play, her bobcat instincts shining through. She would bat at them with soft paws, her claws carefully sheathed, teaching them the art of the ambush. Would bring them her favorite toys, a crumpled piece of paper, a feather, and encourage them to chase it. She was also fiercely protective. If a car rumbled down the long driveway or a deer wandered too close to the house, Willow would be the first to the window, a low growl rumbling in her chest, positioning herself between the puppies and the perceived threat. She and Rusty were a formidable team, a golden Labrador and a wild bobcat, united in their devotion to the 4 little lives they were raising together. Emma was their audience, their provider, their matriarch. She spent her days laughing at their antics and marveling at the sheer improbability of it all. She would sit on her porch in the warm evenings, a cup of chamomile tea in her hands, and watch her incredible family. Rusty would be dozing in a patch of late sun, while her puppies, now growing into clumsy, leggy youngsters, tumbled and wrestled with an incredibly patient Willow nearby. A black puppy would tug on Willow's tufted ear. A golden one would try to pounce on her twitching tail. Willow would absorb it all, occasionally batting one away or pinning another gently with her paws before resuming her regal, watchful pose. One perfect summer evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks of the mountains, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, Emma watched the scene before her. Rusty, Willow, and the 4 puppies were nestled together on a large blanket on the lawn, a tangled heap of fur, wagging tails, and contented sighs. The heart-wrenching fear of that first winter morning in the barn felt like a lifetime ago. The cold, the silence, the loneliness, it had all been melted away, had been replaced by love, by a family, forged in the harshest of winters, bound, not by blood, but by the simple, powerful truth that home is not a place, but a feeling, and family can be found in the most unexpected of hearts. She looked at the photograph on the mantel, visible through the screen door. "We did good, John," she whispered to the quiet house. "We did real good." And for the first time in a very long time, the silence that answered her felt warm, peaceful, and eternal.